name is Nancy Capistran. I'm a Greater Boston Peer Advisory Group Chair for CEOs, as well as an award-winning internationally certified executive coach and crisis advisor. I'd like to introduce Tara Goodwin, who is my business partner at Crisis Interception. Since founding her first company, Goodwin PR, in 2001, Tara attracts, engages, and sustains clients ranging from startups and nonprofits to multi-million-dollar companies, high-profile CEOs, professional athletes, and coaches. She is considered an expert in media relations, crisis management, strategic events, and effective content development and curation. Tara leads decisive change in times of extreme adversity. She provides mental toughness, uncommon agility, sensitivity, professionalism, and sound counsel. Tara has won numerous awards throughout the years. I am thrilled that she is with us today. Welcome, Tara.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is the second of our three-part series, and it's focusing on embracing risk and navigating crisis. We will guide our listeners through the best ways to prepare for crisis, from where you start to how you should respond to what stakeholders want most from companies in crisis. What we're going to specifically talk about today is the anatomy of an effective crisis response, and this is part one. So Tara, I'm curious, what is one thing stakeholders want to see from CEOs or a brand in crisis?
One word, Nancy: trust. They want to know that they can trust the company despite the crisis situation, and they want to know that they can trust the leader is going to handle it in a way that will not only help navigate through the crisis, but continue to elevate the brand despite the crisis situation.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do, for sure, right?
It is not.
Yeah.
Especially if not handled properly.
Right, and more times than not, it's not handled properly.
We've seen it.
Yeah, firsthand we've seen it, right? So I'm curious, when should somebody respond in a crisis? What 4 questions must they be asking?
So there are 4 questions that you can test your response. So you have a crisis, you're not sure whether or not it's time to respond to your employees, to your stakeholders, to the public. So ask yourself these questions given the crisis that has befallen your company. And the first one is, will those who matter most to our company expect us to say something right now? So that's the first question. The second question is, will our silence be seen as indifference or guilt? Worse. The third question is, are others speaking about us now, shaping the narrative and the perception among those who matter most to us? There's something in crisis called the first mover advantage. Whoever defines the crisis first usually wins the crisis response. So think about that. And then the fourth question is, if we wait and don't respond, will we lose our ability to influence the outcome? And if you've answered yes to any one of those 4 questions, you must act now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I appreciate you sharing that. So let's talk about mistakes. What are the mistakes to avoid that most CEOs make during a crisis?
Well, there are a lot of mistakes that can be made in a crisis situation, Nancy, and they all follow a common pattern. Several months ago, earlier this summer, I was fortunate enough to take a course by Helio Fred Garcia, who teaches at Columbia. He is the Public Relations Society of America's top crisis gurus, and he taught a seminar on advanced crisis management. And one of the things that he identified is a common mistake chain that happens in crisis. And he's given us permission to share this with a wide audience, because the more people who understand about crisis management, the better that they can handle it, which is wonderful. So what I like to do is, when I do speaking engagements, I like to show some videos of CEOs who have responded poorly in crisis. And so I would love to share this video of, it happened several years ago, and I'm sure you may have heard of it. It's the United Airlines passenger dragging incident. And I want you to take a look at it first, to look at the visual, the optics, as they say in the PR business, versus what the CEO says in response. So Nancy, could you play that video, please?
Sure.
The chaotic scene unfolding on a United flight in Chicago. Initially, passengers were told the flight was overbooked. 4 passengers were told they had to get off, their names selected by a computer. One of the passengers was dragged down the aisle and off the plane, bleeding from the struggle. He did not want to give up his seat. Tonight, hear the airline's explanation, and we ask, what are your rights once you've boarded a plane? Can they tell you have to give up your seat? ABC's David Curley covers aviation.
It is a stunning scene. That passenger yanked from his row.
Oh my God!
His lip cut, dragged off a United jet for refusing to give up his paid seat.
Oh my God! Look at what you did to him!
Tonight, a Chicago aviation security officer involved here put on leave. But so many are asking, how could this have happened? John Clausen, in the orange shirt, saw and heard it all.
After having done really nothing other than say, this is my seat, I bought and paid for it, I need to go to Louisville. I could not believe what I was seeing or hearing. I was in shock.
United Airlines told passengers the flight was overbooked and now says it was a crew transport issue. 4 seats needed to get a crew from Chicago to Louisville. $800 in vouchers offered, no takers. So United's computer picked 4 passengers, including the 69-year-old man who said he was a doctor and had patients to treat.
Come on.
The man slipped back onto the jet.
I have to go home. I have to go home.
Before he was removed again. United's CEO calls it an upsetting event and apologizes for having to reaccommodate these customers, but no direct apology to the man. The overbooking, even demanding a paying customer give up a seat, is perfectly legal.
It's part of a document that nobody ever looks at called the contract of carriage, which gives basically the airlines, the pilot, the flight attendant, all sorts of rights to pretty much do whatever they want.
You know, every time I see that, my heart is still racing. It's just unfortunate that something like that can possibly happen in this day and age.
It's pretty jarring. And the disconnect between the CEO's response, it's an unfortunate incident, and we apologize that we have to reaccommodate other passengers. And I will tell you that right after this happened, Southwest Air's social media folks jumped right on it, and they sent out a series of communications saying Southwest beats prices, not passengers. They did eventually take it down, but you open yourself up for other companies to take advantage of your crisis as well. And, you know, what was interesting about that is, was it commensurate with what you saw? And the answer is absolutely not. And it could have been avoided. And there are many ways that it could have been avoided. And I would assume that United Airlines has some of the best legal minds and the best crisis people on board, but I don't think that they were activated in a way that they should have been. And I also don't think that the CEO, in his defense, got the information in a timely way. I think they were following a policy and a procedure, but they took it to the letter of the policy. They did not use common sense. Basic common sense. When you see somebody is suffering or struggling, up the ante. They offered $800 in vouchers. Go to $1,000, go to $2,500. They would have gotten a taker. And the other man would have sat on the plane and nothing would have happened. So again, it's part of a common mistake chain. And when I told you my class was taught by Helio Fred Garcia, he also utilizes other crisis experts. So the mistake chain is courtesy of Robert Middlestat Jr., and he is a crisis counselor and also an author of several crisis books. And I found it fascinating because so many crises, and especially United Airlines, textbook follows exactly what he lays out. And the first thing he says is it's a failure to correct a seemingly minor or isolated problem. You needed to transport a crew. You had to have passengers give up their seats. What are you going to do? You're going to ask if anybody will leave. You're going to offer some vouchers. There were no takers. So you're not going to drag somebody off a plane who refuses to get off. There are many other solutions. So that's the first piece. Failing to recognize that there's a problem that you could correct early on. The second is there is a subsequent problem that compounds the effect of the first. So your problem was you couldn't transport your crew, so you had to ask people to get off. The subsequent problem was this gentleman refused to get off. The third piece is an ineffective corrective action. And I think we can all agree that watching him dragged down the aisle was an ineffective corrective action.
Yeah.
And then his statement, Oscar Munoz's statement, denial or self-denial about the real truth of what's happening. We apologize that we have to tone deaf. You reaccommodate other passengers. What? That, and then all of a sudden recognition that it's out of control and the ultimate disaster. And that's exactly what happened. And if you followed the social media of United Airlines, people were tagging them and cutting up their frequent flyer cards and talking about how horrible this was. And eventually it was settled. Oscar Munoz did apologize to the gentleman who refused to get off the plane, but it was far too late, and it cost the airline far more than it would have to even charter a private jet to take their staff where they needed to go.
Yeah, really unfortunate. And, you know, if anything, it's a lesson learned for all of us to be thinking about our own houses and our own world of what we're doing in business. And the human dynamic element is crucially important. And as we're thinking about like, oh, what might that look like in my backyard? How would I handle that with my company? And I think that's part of, again, getting to how important it is to do pre-planning, because that stuff happens so quickly and it just goes like in a second. And speak to the whole social media piece of it. Sometimes, you know, some of the things you've said, like the employees or others, it's already out there before management even knows that there's an issue. Right?
Well, and we always counsel our CEOs to get out fast and get out first, because everybody has a smartphone. Everybody has the ability to identify a crisis in your company well before you even know it exists. I was talking to one CEO who his company manufactures tissue paper that goes into gift bags, and he learned that there was a fire in one of his plants on Facebook. And as jaw-dropping as that is, it's a sobering reality of what is out there. Often CEOs learn about a crisis through social media.
And that's kind of unfortunate, don't you think?
And it doesn't have to happen if you have a plan, because if you have a plan, it would say, if there's an emergency in one of our plants or our factories, X supervisor immediately calls this number and calls the crisis team leader, and it goes right to the CEO. So they probably could have, and there should have been a communications policy that tells employees, do not publish anything that goes onto a company website without express permission of the communications team. You know, so there were several mistakes that were happening there. And I think the key is with the pre-planning, Nancy, you can avoid most of those mistakes. Not saying you're going to be perfect, but you'll be a lot better if you have planned out your response.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Tara, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I want to share a little bit about our third segment, which is the in the anatomy of an effective crisis response. We'll be talking about key questions to ask your team in a crisis to help you make an informed decision. We'll be talking about holding statements and why it's crucial to the success in navigating a crisis, and what the elements are as an effective holding statement. So stay tuned for that one. Thanks very much for your time today, Tara, and all the audience. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Nancy.